Welcome back. All right, so this is the first video of this type for this season. I want to look at defensemen. I want to look at the prominent defensemen that signed. There are others that have signed between November of last year and now. But I wanted to look at some of the more prominent ones and maybe controversial ones as well. So Charlie McAvoy today gets this big contract, right? Age 24, October 15th, 2021 today, he signs it. 8 years, a total of $76 million, which is tied for the most on this board. $9.5 million cap hit. Now, what I've also got on the board here is Norris voting. Because while I know Norris voting is... It's not exactly exact science, right? And every year it changes. If a defenseman's in the Norris running year after year after year, he's probably pretty good. And in McAvoy's case, he's trending in the right direction. So I've got 2021, 2020, 2019, and 2018 on the board. I thought if I look over the last 4 years... some of the veteran defensemen on the board, how many times they show up, might tell you something. And who knew there'd be one that's been voted for all 4 years. McAvoy was number 5 last season in Norris voting, and the year before he was number 10. Now, the interesting thing with young defensemen when it comes to Norris voting is it's hard to break through because you have the veterans that everybody knows, and I think name recognition plays a large role in voting for awards. And I've said that for years, that there have been times where somebody wins an award and I'll say, you know, he deserved that award last year. This year, I'm not sure if he necessarily did, but because he had a half-decent season and because everybody knows how good he is, he gets the award again. Sometimes it happens with Norris, it might happen with the Vezina, it happens with the Selke. Even to some extent with the Hart, sometimes you'll see a guy get it and you'll go, well, wait, is that the right guy? And yeah, that's how that works. But Charlie McAvoy is a very good young defenseman, and at age 24, signed for 8 years, that takes him to age 32, right? And the fact that this kicks in next year means takes him to age 33, which is good, right? So it's a $9.5 million cap hit. There's risk there, but the number of 8-year deals is surprising. So coming out of the lockdown and the slowdown and the fact that the NHL loses like over $1 billion, I had expected a lot of short-term contracts. I had expected contract values to stay right about the same. But the market for defensemen is clearly really inflated right now. So defensemen that are signing contracts right now might be getting more money than we as fans think that they are going to get. But it's just a sign that that's what the market is. Ryan Pulock signs yesterday. He's 27 years of age, also gets an 8-year contract. So with his contract being 8 years and him being 3 years older, that qualifies as a little more risk. Although, if you're an Islanders fan, you're happy with it, right? $49.2 million in total, and that means that's $6.15 million a year. So McAvoy's making about $3.5 million more. Part of the reason being he's 3 years younger, and they're buying those UFA years. So when you're buying UFA years and all of that, you're probably going to end up paying a little more money. And McAvoy, who's been top 10 in Norris voting twice. Pulock has not been top 10 in Norris voting. Hasn't even had a year where he's had multiple votes for the Norris. And as an Islander fan, if you're saying, well, that's because we're overlooked, that's not inaccurate. Absolutely not. But it could be part of the reason why McAvoy can sit there in negotiations and go, hey, I was 5th in Norris last year and I'm just getting started. Matthias Ekholm, 32 years of age, signed on October 13th, so we're all the way back to 2 days ago. I liked his contract, though. 4 years. So at age 32, it makes sense that it's 4 years, right? You're not going to give an 8-year contract to him and sign him into his 40s. $25 million, cap hit $6.25 million. In 2019, he was 10th in Norris voting. And I've always thought that Matthias Ekholm is underrated because there's always somebody who overshadows him in Nashville. And right now it's Roman Josi, right? Who signed a big contract before the cutoff for this. Because, yeah, I could have just kept putting more and more defensemen on, had multiple boards, and then it just gets ridiculous. But I like the Ekholm deal. Quinn Hughes, there was a lot of discussion on October 1st when he signs this contract, but he's 21 years of age. So this, again, is where you're trying to buy those years of free agency. So 6 years for Hughes, $47.1 million, cap hit $7.85 million. He was 15th in Norris voting back in 2020, and I know that he gets a lot of flack for his defense. I think sometimes that's overblown. He does need a defensive defenseman to cover him, but he wouldn't be the first defenseman you can say that about. There are defensemen in the Hall of Fame who needed a defensive defenseman to cover up for them because they were an adventure in their own zone, or they just didn't come back. There was that too. So for Quinn Hughes, I think that's a decent deal, and you'll see he makes less than some of these other guys, which I think again is fair. I think in a vacuum, if you look at that $7.85 million, you might say, well, what has he done and what has he done to deserve it? But when you see he's paid less than Nurse, less than McAvoy, less than Werenski, less than Hamilton, less than Jones, less than Heiskanen, there's a lot of guys that are above him on the pay chart, right? Then you get to Rasmus Dahlin, also 21 years of age, signed September 22nd of 2021. Only a 3-year deal. So this is a bridge deal. This is a rare bridge deal that we thought we were going to get a lot of bridge deals and we really didn't. $18 million in total, $6 million cap hit. No risk. I believe he's still a restricted free agent at the end of this contract. And yeah, Dahlin, a defenseman that still seems to be coming into his own. Again, people may look at that cap hit and say, that seems to be really high. But Dahlin, a #1 draft pick, a lot of potential there. Had a half-decent second half of the season. Had a really rough first half for a team that was abysmal. So, again, you're paying for that potential. And that's the difference between contracts now and contracts 15, 20 years ago. You would never pay a defenseman for potential. You'd never pay a forward or a goaltender for potential. We're going to pay you $5 million a year for what we think you're going to do. What used to happen was young players were underpaid throughout their entry-level contracts, and then the bridge contract that followed. And then by the time they're really getting paid, it would be when they were starting to decline if they were a forward. And so a lot of those contracts ended up looking bad and would end up being bought out. Philip Hronek, which is an underrated contract that I think got signed here by Yzerman. 23 years of age, signs September 3rd, 2021. Also a bridge deal, but at $13.2 million in total and a $4.4 million cap hit, I think that might be one of the better contracts on the board. Because again, Hronek's 26 at the end of that deal, right? Or 27? No, 26, because some of these are signed a year ahead, right? I'm trying to do in my mind which ones are signed a year ahead. He was RFA this summer. So again, he'll be in his prime when he gets to sign his next deal. And yeah, I mean, if he hits and he does really, really well, then Yzerman will pay him and he'll do it happily. Colton Parayko. This is one of the more risky contracts. Colton Parayko, 29 years of age. On September 1st, he signs an extension with the Blues. 8 years, $52 million in total, cap hit of $6.5 million. The risk with the Parayko one, the $6.5 million cap hit right now, they're perfectly fine with. Parayko is an underrated defenseman in the NHL. He hasn't had the Norris votes, but again, he's been overshadowed by other defensemen, right? Pietrangelo, anybody. So for Parayko, I think that $6.5 million per year is good now. I think the fact that it's an 8-year deal means later on it could be problematic once he's 33, 34. He plays a tough game in a lot of minutes. So odds are when he hits 34 years of age, maybe on his way down. But for the Blues, they give him that contract now. They give him that security, and they'll deal with that later. Which I think that sometimes we may get a little too focused on the fact that it's an 8-year deal rather than saying, okay, they still got this player in their lineup. They're still below the cap. They made a good move there. Neil Pionk, 25 years of age, signed his extension on August 11th. 4 years, $23.5 million in total, $5.88 million. If I had told anybody when he was traded from the Rangers to the Jets that he would be signing this deal with the Jets in 2021, people would have laughed. People would have laughed at me over that one, but $5.88 million is probably a little bit high, but I mean, just not a lot. And again, when you look at the overall market, he's making, over half of what some of these guys are making, but not by a lot over half, right? So 4-year deal is my favorite. I love 4-year deals. And if he's good at the end of this, well, he's nearing 30 years of age at the end of the contract. So, we'll see where things go for Pionk between now and then. Darnell Nurse, one of the contracts that really got people talking, right? 27 years of age, August 6th of 2021, signs the 8-year extension. So this will take him through his mid-30s, and he will be an Oiler for likely the rest of his career, right? So $74 million, $9.25 million. I think what people forget is he was 7th in Norris voting last year. He got Norris votes, and he was very good. He had a fantastic year, and now this is where the divide happens, where some say, well, that was a career year. He won't do that again. And there are others saying, look, he had great numbers last year. You have to pay the man. To me, it comes down to the concern I always have with this kind of a deal is you're paying him based on the most recent season, but is that the real guy, or is the real guy more, down from that number and maybe a little bit above the year before, but maybe there is a bit of an overpayment there. We'll see. But for the Oilers, being able to give Darnell Nurse an 8-year deal, it sends a signal that this is a team that wants to win and they want to keep their players and keep them happy. So I think not only does this deal work for Nurse, very happy with it, but if I'm a player in the NHL and I'm looking, for a team that I think shows good loyalty to its players, you know what? Edmonton's done a good job. Look at Puljujarvi. There was all this talk about they're going to have to trade Puljujarvi. Puljujarvi's going to go, and they made it work. He's back in the lineup, and he's back on the first line. So there's a lot of goodwill out there right now with the Oilers, which I think makes it easier to attract other players to your team. Adam Pelech, 26 years of age, on August 6th of 2021, same day as Nurse, signs an 8-year deal, much lower value, $46 million, $5.75 million. So 8 years takes him into his mid-30s as well. That's really good value, and it shows the difference between the guys who put up the offensive numbers and the guys who don't. So defensive defensemen, we respect them as fans. They do not get paid as much as the guy who puts up all the points. Quinn Hughes is getting paid because he's a point producer. You can put up about a point per game. Pelech will not do that for you. He'll just be a shutdown defenseman. Pelech is exactly the kind of defenseman you want playing with Quinn Hughes, and yet the price tag is about $2 million less for Pelech, who has more experience and has already shown that he can keep up that level of play for the Islanders. Then you get into Zach Werenski, 24 years of age, on July 29th of 2021, signs a 6-year extension with Columbus for $57.5 million. It is the highest cap hit on the board at $9.58 million. In 2020, he was 8th in Norris voting. If he can get back to that level of play, then absolutely, this is a decent deal. The fact that it's 6 years, I actually kind of like that because it means that he's just getting into his 30s at the time this contract comes to an end. Again, the ones that are signed into their mid-30s may not age very well. So I think for Werenski, it's a good deal. For Columbus as well, a team that has lost a lot of players like Panarin, Bobrovsky, Seth Jones, etc., players who, big names who sign big contracts elsewhere. I think it's important for Columbus to also have a big signing or two on their roster, just so that it doesn't feel like they're a feeder team for other teams in the league, right? It's not much fun. It's part of the reason why whenever I try getting into baseball, it's hard because there are certain teams you can see in Major League Baseball that are feeder teams. They develop the players, they're really good, they have a couple really good seasons, and then, you want to get paid? And they go to the Yankees. They go to the Red Sox. They go wherever, they don't stay with those teams because they can't afford to pay them. So it's nice to see Werenski get a good contract from Columbus. Now, Dougie Hamilton, who of course signed his big deal this summer, 28 years of age, on July 28th signs that deal for 7 years, so that'll take him into his mid-30s. $63 million in total, $9 million cap hit. Dougie Hamilton has had votes for the Norris Trophy every year. Now, he is the only one who's been on the Norris list every year. And I apologize if I've said Calder as well. I mean Norris Trophy. He was number 4 this past year, 2021. 2020, he was number 7 on the list. And he was 14th on the list both in 2018 and 2019. So Dougie Hamilton is notable as a very good defenseman, and this is playing in Carolina. Now he moves on to New Jersey. We'll see if he can stay on that list this year, but that's part of the reason why New Jersey pays a hefty fee for him and why they have to pay him into his mid-30s because, this is a guy who can say, hey, I get Norris votes every year, I'm on the Norris list every year, and that gets you paid. Tyson Barrie, 29 years of age, and I'm mentioning Tyson Barrie for a very specific reason. So, July 28th of 2021, he signs a 3-year deal with the Oilers for a total of $13.5 million, $4.5 million a year. Tyson Barrie is not an elite level defenseman, so I'm not putting him in this same category. But what's interesting is Tyson Barrie, who also hasn't been on the list of Norris Trophy defensemen, and he's the first defenseman ever to lead the league in scoring and not get a Norris vote. But what's interesting to me with Barrie is that he takes that bridge deal And I kind of really like that cap hit of 4.5 million because just on pure points alone, yeah, that contract makes a lot of sense. And low key, I think what the Oilers did by getting Nurse and Barrie both done for a combined cap hit of around 14 million, which is high. Agreed, that's high. But I don't think they did as badly as some have said. Now, do I take issue with some of the Oilers' defense? Sure, maybe. But again, it's all speculation at this point. And I think the Barrie contract's not too bad. So Cale Makar, 22 years of age, on July 24th of this year, he signed his 6-year extension. So what I find funny about this is Quinn Hughes signs a 6-year extension in Vancouver, and immediately people say, well, he didn't sign 8 because he doesn't want to stay in Vancouver. Cale Makar signs a 6-year deal with Colorado, and crickets. Nobody said, oh, well, clearly this means he doesn't want to stay in Colorado. $54 million, $9 million cap hit. So Makar, in a similar situation to Hughes, ends up getting a little over $1 million more per season. He was number 2 on Norris voting this past year, and the year before he was number 9. Cale Makar is going to win a Norris Trophy. When that is, we'll see. Could be 2022, could be 2023, but Makar's going to win a Norris Trophy at some point in his career, absolutely. Now, what's interesting is, right beneath the Cale Makar signing is Seth Jones, who signed a day before. And while most universally loved the Makar signing, there were just as many that when Jones signs this contract with Chicago said, wait a minute. And there's a reason for that. So Seth Jones, 27 years of age, in his prime right now. Absolutely. July 23rd, 2021 is when he signs this 8-year deal. So he gets 2 more years than Makar, takes him into his mid-30s, right? $76 million. So it is tied with Charlie McAvoy for the most amount of money, $9.5 million cap hit. So clearly, when McAvoy is sitting down to make his arguments, Seth Jones may very well be the one he's comparing himself to. Seth Jones was not in the top 15 of voting for Norris this year. Number 14 in 2020, number 9 in 2019, and he was number 4 in 2018. And it feels like with Seth Jones that he's kind of been going backwards. Now, maybe going to Chicago will straighten that out. I know that during the preseason, there was a lot of eyeballs on Seth Jones for how he was going to play and how things were going to turn out with this new deal. And that's part and parcel how that works. Sometimes it may look like, certain players are getting picked on when they're making that amount of money and they sign a huge deal like that. That's part and parcel of what goes with it. So with Jones's contract, it's a higher cap hit than most of the others on the board, and he's going to spend this year trying to show everybody, hey, Chicago got a good deal with me, and this is a good contract. And I've liked Seth Jones's game in the past. This past year, the 2021 season, I really didn't think his play was as good. I do see where he started to kind of fall off. Maybe Tortorella was overplaying him. So maybe this was maybe exhaustion plays a role. Maybe he was playing too many roles at the same time. And maybe in Chicago his role will be simplified and he'll be seen as one of the better defensemen in the NHL again. And that's the bet that the Chicago Blackhawks are making. Miro Heiskanen, 21 years of age. July 17th he signed his contract, so all the way back in July. And 8-year deal for Heiskanen as well. And I would even go as far as to argue that maybe this is the one that sets the market. So he gets the 8-year deal. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 defensemen have had 8-year deals, including Heiskanen in this bunch. $67.6 million in total, $8.45 million cap hit. He was 12th in Norris voting in 2020. Didn't qualify in 2021. It was a rough year for Dallas in 2021, which is part of what drives me insane when it comes to the voting. That if a team doesn't play very well, it's harder for an individual player who may have had a really good season to get voting for an individual award. But yeah, I think the Heiskanen deal, when you look at it in comparison with some of the others, at 8 years, it means that he's 29, 30 at the time that this thing finishes out. And so far younger than some of the other ones on this board. At an $8.45 million, again, in a vacuum, that looks like a really high cap hit for a guy who hasn't won a Norris Trophy and playing for a team that hasn't been a contender. Really, I mean, they went on the run in 2020, but that was not a team that was necessarily seen as a contender going into the playoffs, right? They got hot at the right time, and their goaltending was really, really good, and they get all the way to the Stanley Cup final before Tampa takes them out. But Heiskanen may end up being an under the radar kind of guy throughout his career, but I don't mind that cap hit at all. Now, Sergachev, I have on the board because looking back to last year, November 25th of 2020, signed the 3-year deal. So this is up in 2023. 14.4 million dollars with Tampa, cap hit of 4.8 million. Sergachev at 4.8 million might be one of the best bargain contracts on the board, but it shows you that the market right now for defensemen is high. But again, the salary cap is expected to go up by $1 million next year, and then I think there's a lot of optimism that it's just going to keep going up after that. You would think, well, the NHL would learn from this huge downturn, right? That sometimes the economy won't necessarily always be going up. Nope. And again, salary cap going up means our ticket prices go up and the price of everything goes. So they're betting on that. And yeah, so the Sergachev deal, I think, looking back to one from about a year ago, has aged really, really well. And we'll see which one of these aged poorly and which one of them aged. They're not all going to do very well. And there's going to be some that look really good, say, a year or two from now. But I think signing a defenseman in their early 20s, even in their mid-20s, when they're one of the better defensemen in the league and giving them a lot of money, even the no trade clause that goes with that and the high cap hit, I think that can be a good move. So, I mean, the most expensive ones on the board here, cap-wise, you've got Werenski, who's just a little bit ahead of Jones, which seemed kind of, I don't know, it seemed kind of odd that right after Jones signs, Werenski signs, he just gets a little bit more than Jones in terms of cap hit. Although the Werenski deal is less in years. It's 6 years instead of the 8. And again, when you look at the grand scheme of things, we'll see which ones end up being overpaid. So I guess the question I have for everybody out there watching this is, which one of these deals is the best value, and which one do you think is the most overpriced? Which one do you think is the one that gets regretted the most? And do any of these end up getting bought out, or do they even think about it? Because at 8 years, you really can't buy them out. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. And if there's a lot of signing bonuses in there as well, it can make it more difficult. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.